Vienna, 1854. The marble colonnade of Oldenburg Palace rose before Claire Ashford exactly as she remembered it, gleaming pale and merciless beneath the December moon, as unyielding as it had been on the frozen morning she had passed through its gates for the last time. Back then, the grinding of carriage wheels against cobblestone had sounded like a door slamming shut on her entire life. Now, fresh snow muffled every sound, softening what had once been too sharp to bear. Daniel held her hand with an earnest, unrelenting grip, his gray eyes fixed on the palace that loomed before them like a golden giant stirring from sleep. He was only 4, yet he already carried the quiet seriousness of Henrik von Oldenburg, the same subtle furrow between his brows when concentrating, the same precise way of tilting his head when listening, as if the world demanded his careful attention. Claire felt something twist painfully in her chest. It was impossible to stand here, at this threshold, and pretend the child beside her didn't carry the face of everything she had been denied. "Mama." His small voice pierced the distant strains of a waltz drifting from the illuminated windows. "Is this where Papa lives?" She knelt, pulling the worn traveling cloak tighter around them both. Music floated across the winter air, laughter spilling from the grand ballroom, where Vienna's elite had gathered for the annual Christmas masquerade, the most anticipated event of the season. Claire had attended once, a lifetime ago, when she still believed the palace could be home. The Dowager Duchess Louisa had handed her that forged letter on a night much like this, her thin smile perfectly controlled, each word a blade wrapped in silk. Claire had not understood then how thoroughly she was being erased. She understood now, and she had chosen this night deliberately, the night when half of Austria's aristocracy would stand as unwitting witnesses, when truth could no longer be buried beneath polite lies and carefully maintained silences. For a moment, she faltered. What if Henrik looked at Daniel and refused to see him? What if 5 years of his mother's manipulation had closed his heart completely? The doubt burned like winter cold against exposed skin, but Daniel squeezed her hand again, his small fingers trusting, and that simple gesture called her back to herself. She rose, smoothing the plain gray wool of her dress, so starkly simple against the silks and velvets gliding past the windows above. Then she drew a steady breath and moved forward toward the palace entrance. The great oak doors stood open, golden light spilling onto the snow-covered courtyard like an invitation or a judgment. Behind her, the iron gates of Oldenburg Palace clanged shut with a sound that rang across the frozen gardens, heavy and final, as if the estate itself had sealed the choice she'd made. There was no turning back now, only the path she had carved for herself, and the courage, at last, to walk it. If you too treasure stories that whisper like forgotten letters and echo like the heartbreak of a distant age, leave your like and subscribe to Tales of the Gilded Empire. Your support carries these narratives across oceans to reach souls who hunger for the romance and reckoning of an era when a single truth could shatter an empire built on lies. And before we begin, tell me in the comments which city and country you're watching from tonight. It's always wondrous to discover how far these tales of love and justice travel. Claire Ashford had been Duchess of Oldenburg for barely 2 years, though those months now felt as if they belonged to someone else's story entirely, a tale told about a naive girl who no longer existed. Born the daughter of an English diplomat stationed in Vienna, she had learned early to move through drawing rooms where her accent marked her as foreign, her dowry as modest, her manner as just slightly too forthright for the rigid formality of Austrian aristocracy. She had grown up in the margins of embassy receptions and state dinners, watching, listening, learning to read the language of fans and glances and carefully chosen silences. Her father had believed in honest diplomacy. Claire had learned that honesty, in certain circles, was considered a weakness to be exploited. When Henrik von Oldenburg, the reserved duke with storm-gray eyes and a rare, quiet smile, chose her over a dozen Austrian heiresses with impeccable bloodlines, Claire had believed, just for one shimmering moment, that she had finally found a place where she could breathe freely. He had spoken to her about books, about music, about the absurdity of certain social conventions, and she had mistaken his private kindness for public acceptance. But the air had grown thin quickly, suffocatingly so. The Dowager Duchess Louisa, Henrik's mother and the true power behind Oldenburg's throne, had never accepted the match. Where other matrons whispered behind fans, Louisa wielded silence like a scalpel, her disapproval so absolute it required no voice. Every time Henrik departed on state business, Claire remained behind, alone, exposed to the cold assessment of her mother-in-law, a gaze that catalogued every flaw, every inadequacy, whether real or imagined. When the Duke traveled to Prussia for trade negotiations, promising to return before spring, Claire tried desperately to believe him. Letters passed between them, his words measured but warm, hers filled with a longing she struggled to restrain. But the correspondence grew sporadic, then stopped altogether, until the final letter arrived, the one that tore her world apart. Our marriage was an error in judgment. Leave Oldenburg Palace and do not return. Your presence here serves no further purpose. The handwriting was unmistakably his. The cruelty was not. But Claire, increasingly ill and utterly isolated, had no way to distinguish between the two. Under the Dowager Duchess Louisa's silent command, the household closed ranks. Frau Weber, the housekeeper, collected Claire's personal effects with averted eyes. The butler stood rigid and expressionless as the carriage was prepared. No one would meet her gaze. No one would answer her desperate questions. Claire left Oldenburg Palace with a single trunk and a future that felt heavier than the February sleet soaking through her inadequate cloak. She had no family to return to, her father recently deceased, her mother's pension barely sufficient for one person, let alone two. Pride, that stubborn English pride her mother-in-law had always despised, kept her from writing to the few diplomatic families who might have offered shelter. In Vienna, far enough from the palace to avoid recognition, but close enough to hear its bells on quiet evenings, Claire found refuge in a boarding house near the university district. The room was barely larger than a servant's quarters, the walls thin enough to hear every footstep in the corridor, but it was hers, and no one there cared about titles or bloodlines or the scandal of a cast-off wife. The pregnancy revealed itself weeks later, with morning sickness that left her trembling over a basin while the landlady's daughter brought weak tea and thin sympathy. Claire discovered she was carrying Henrik's child in that narrow room with peeling wallpaper, alone except for a midwife who asked no questions about the missing husband. And in that moment of devastating clarity, she understood she would never again be the fragile girl who had believed in fairy tales. Daniel was born there on a rain-soaked April night, with only the midwife and the landlady's quiet competence to see her through. When they placed him in her arms for the first time, and she saw Henrik's eyes looking back at her, gray and serious and unbearably beautiful, something shifted permanently inside her. Not hope, not yet, but something fiercer. A thread of courage, thin but unbreakable, that grew stronger with every day that followed. 5 years passed in that small room, and others like it. 5 years of teaching English to merchants' daughters and clerks' sons, of mending clothes by candlelight while Daniel slept, of rationing meals so her son could have enough. 5 years of watching Daniel grow into his father's face, his expressions, his gestures, while Henrik himself remained in the palace, believing his wife had abandoned him. 5 years of anger slowly, painfully transforming into something sharper and more useful, resolve. Now she was returning to Oldenburg Palace, and it could be no better night than the Christmas masquerade, when Vienna's most powerful families would gather as witnesses to a truth that could no longer be contained. Claire was not coming to beg. She was not coming to plead. She was coming to reveal. And she had chosen this night deliberately, because truth, like justice, deserves an audience. Because lies thrive in shadows. Because her son deserved his name, his inheritance, and most of all, his father. The servants' corridor smelled of beeswax and pine, exactly as Claire remembered. She moved through the narrow passage with Daniel's hand clasped firmly in hers, their footsteps muffled by the worn runner that had seen decades of invisible labor. Above them, crystal chandeliers blazed, and the string quartet's music swelled through the walls. But down here, in the arteries of the palace, everything remained hushed, functional, forgotten. "Stay close to me," Claire whispered, pausing at the junction where the service stairs met the main hall. Through the archway, she could see them, Vienna's elite spinning in their silks and masks, champagne flutes catching the candlelight like captured stars. Daniel pressed against her skirts, his small body tense with the instinct that this place held danger. Beatrice appeared from the shadows, her blue gown marking her as a guest, not a servant. Claire's younger sister had arrived 3 days earlier under the pretense of visiting old diplomatic friends. Now she bent to Daniel's height. Her smile warmed despite the fear in her eyes. "There's my brave boy. You remember what we practiced?" Daniel nodded solemnly. "Stay with Aunt B until Mama calls." "That's right." Beatrice straightened, gripping Claire's arm. "Are you certain about this? Once you step through that door." "I know." Claire met her sister's gaze. "There's no other way. If I ask for a private audience, Louisa will simply have me removed. But if I walk into that ballroom with Daniel, in front of everyone, she can't erase us again." The music shifted, a waltz ending, conversations rising in the brief pause. Claire recognized that moment, the inhale before the next dance, when attention drifted and guests refilled their glasses. It was now or never. She touched Daniel's cheek once more, memorizing the trust in his gray eyes, then released his hand to Beatrice. "I'll be close," she promised him, "just on the other side of those people. If you need me, Aunt B will bring you." Then Claire stepped into the light. The ballroom unfolded before her like a stage set she'd once known by heart. The checkered marble floor, the soaring columns wrapped in evergreen garlands, the massive Christmas tree glittering with candles at the far end. And there, near the center of it all, stood the Dowager Duchess Louisa, resplendent in black velvet and diamonds, holding court like the queen she'd always believed herself to be. Claire walked forward. Her plain gray dress drew eyes immediately, a dull stone among jewels. Whispers started at the periphery, spreading inward like ripples on disturbed water. She heard fragments. "Who is that? How did she get in? Is that—" No, it couldn't be. Louisa's head turned. For one suspended moment, the older woman's face showed nothing, a mask more complete than any worn by the guests around her. Then something flickered beneath the surface, not quite fear, but close. Recognition. And with it, calculation. Claire stopped 3 paces away. The music stuttered. The conductor, sensing something amiss, lifted his hand. Silence dropped over the ballroom like a curtain falling. "Lady Louisa," Claire said, her voice carrying in the sudden quiet. She didn't curtsy, didn't bow her head, stood as an equal, perhaps for the first time in her life. "I believe we have unfinished business." The Dowager Duchess's fingers tightened around her fan, the only sign of disturbance in her otherwise perfect composure. "You should not be here." "No," Claire replied, calm and clear. "I am the Duchess of Oldenburg. This palace is still my home." Gasps rippled outward. Heads turned, seeking context, confirmation. Claire felt the weight of 100 eyes, but she kept her gaze locked on Louisa, refusing to flinch. "You abandoned your position," Louisa said, her voice like ice. "You walked away from your duty, from your husband. You have no right to this name." Claire had prepared for this, had practiced these words in her narrow boarding house room until they felt like armor. "I abandoned nothing. You cast me out." The murmur grew louder, sharper. Somewhere in the crowd, a woman's voice rose in shock. Claire sensed the momentum shifting, truth beginning to crack through the facade of propriety. And then a voice cut through the noise, deep and stunned and painfully familiar. "Claire." She turned slowly, though her body already knew. Henrik von Oldenburg stood near the ballroom entrance, pale as marble beneath the candlelight. He'd arrived late, she realized, probably from his study, perhaps drawn by the disturbance. His gray eyes, Daniel's eyes, fixed on her with an expression that split the distance between recognition and disbelief. For 5 years, she'd imagined this moment. In her imaginings, she'd been strong, unmoved, fierce. But seeing him now, seeing the man she'd loved staring at her as though she were a ghost risen from his worst nightmares, something inside her threatened to break. "Henrik," she said, and heard her voice fracture on his name. He took a step forward, then stopped, as if his body had forgotten how to move. "You," he whispered. "You came back." Henrik von Oldenburg felt the floor tilt beneath him. For 5 years, he'd lived with the certainty that Claire had abandoned him, that the woman he'd married had chosen freedom over their vows, over him. His mother had told him so. The letter had said so. Every unanswered inquiry, every empty response from the few who might have known her whereabouts, had confirmed it. And yet here she stood, in a dress too thin for Vienna's winter, her dark hair pulled back without ornament, her brown eyes holding something he couldn't name. Not the soft uncertainty he remembered, but something harder, sharpened by years he hadn't witnessed. I don't understand, he managed, the words scraping his throat. Where have you been? Claire's chin lifted slightly. Where you believed I wanted to be. Away from you. The statement struck him like a physical blow. That was your choice. Even as he said it, the words tasted wrong. You wrote to me. You said. What did I say, Henrik? Claire stepped closer, and he saw something flash in her eyes. Not tears. Anger. Tell them. Tell everyone here what I supposedly wrote. His mouth opened, then closed. The letter had burned itself into his memory, every cruel word. But speaking them aloud, here, with Vienna's elite watching, felt suddenly, impossibly obscene. That our marriage was a mistake, his mother said instead, her voice cutting through his hesitation. Louisa moved to his side, positioning herself slightly ahead, as she always did. That you could not bear the responsibilities of being a duchess. That you wished to be free of the burden of this family. Claire turned her full attention to the Dowager Duchess. Every word a lie. You dare, Louisa began, but Claire spoke over her, louder, clearer. I never wrote those words. I wrote to my husband every day while he was in Prussia, letters begging him to come home, telling him I was alone here, asking him to trust me over the whispers. Her voice rose, steady and devastating. Not one of those letters reached him, because you made certain they didn't. The ballroom erupted. Shocked voices overlapped, questions hurled from all directions. Henrik felt his brother Peter appear at his elbow, solid and grounding. What is she talking about? Peter murmured, but Henrik couldn't answer, couldn't think. His mind raced back to those months in Prussia, the growing silence from home, his mother's letters arriving instead, each one carefully worded to suggest Claire's increasing distance, her dissatisfaction, her ultimate betrayal. That is a lie, Louisa said, but her voice had lost its edge. The girl left of her own accord. She wrote the letter. You saw it yourself, Henrik. I saw a letter with my husband's handwriting, Claire corrected, her gaze never leaving Louisa. A letter that broke my heart and sent me into the February cold with nowhere to go. A letter I now know was forged. Henrik's world narrowed to a single point. Forged, the word barely formed. Claire finally looked at him, and the pain in her eyes nearly undid him. Your mother orchestrated everything. The intercepted letters, the forged dismissal, the staff ordered to remain silent. She wanted me gone, Henrik, and she made certain you would never question it. She's lying, Louisa insisted, but the protest sounded hollow even to Henrik's reeling senses. This is manipulation. She returns after 5 years with wild accusations. Then let's ask her Schmidt, Claire said, her voice dropping to something quieter but no less forceful. Your butler has served this family for 30 years. Ask him if he delivered every letter addressed to the Duke while he was away. Every head turned toward the ballroom side entrance, where her Schmidt stood frozen, his face the color of old parchment. Henrik crossed the distance in 4 strides. Schmidt. The name came out rough. Tell me. The butler's hands trembled. He looked to Louisa, seeking rescue, but found none. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. Not every letter, Your Grace. The admission dropped like a stone into still water. What? Henrik's vision blurred at the edges. What letters? Schmidt swallowed hard. The Duchess Claire's correspondence. I was instructed to redirect them, to not send them forward to Prussia. Henrik's legs threatened to give out. Peter caught his arm, held him upright. Mother, Peter said, and his voice carried an edge Henrik had never heard from his younger brother. What did you do? But Louisa's expression had hardened into something cold and impenetrable. I did what was necessary. The girl was unsuitable. 2 years without an heir, always unwell, too weak for her station. I protected this family. Protected, Claire repeated, and the word held all the weight of 5 stolen years. You destroyed a marriage to protect your pride. Henrik turned to her, his breath shallow. Claire, if this is true. It's true, she said, and there's more you need to know. She moved toward the side corridor where she'd entered. Henrik followed without thought, the crowd parting, everyone straining to see, to hear. When Claire reached the archway, she gestured, and a young woman in blue stepped forward. My sister, Beatrice, Claire said. She's been carrying something. Someone. Beatrice Ashford moved into the light, and beside her, clinging to her hand, was a child. A boy perhaps 4 years old. Dark hair, slightly tousled. Gray eyes that swept the crowd with cautious intelligence. The line of his jaw, the set of his shoulders, the way he tilted his head. Henrik's heart stopped. The child looked at him, and Henrik saw himself. Saw his own childhood face reflected in this small, serious boy. The resemblance wasn't subtle. It was undeniable. Absolute. "This is Daniel," Claire said softly. "Your son." The ballroom exploded into chaos. Claire moved on instinct, crossing to Daniel and lifting him into her arms before the rising noise could frighten him further. He buried his face against her neck, his small body trembling. "Too loud," he whispered, and her heart cracked. "I know, my love. We'll go somewhere quiet soon." She pressed a kiss to his hair, breathing in the familiar scent of him, letting it steady her against the storm erupting around them. Voices crashed over one another. Shock, scandal, disbelief. Women clutched their fans. Men exchanged sharp, urgent words. Somewhere near the back, someone laughed, a high, desperate sound quickly stifled. Henrik stood motionless, his face drained of all color. He stared at Daniel with an expression that moved through too many emotions to name. Horror, wonder, grief, all tangled into something raw and terrible. "That's impossible," Louisa said, but her voice had lost its authority. She looked suddenly smaller, her perfect posture wavering. "You left. You weren't." "I was pregnant," Claire said, louder now, her arm tightening around Daniel. "When you threw me out of this palace, I was already carrying your son's child. I didn't know yet. I only learned later, alone in a boarding house, with no one to turn to." The whispers intensified, cutting and vicious. Claire caught fragments. "Cast out while pregnant? The Dowager Duchess knew? That boy is the heir." Peter von Oldenburg stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "Is this true?" He looked at his mother with something close to revulsion. "You expelled her while she carried the heir?" Louisa opened her mouth, but no sound emerged. For the first time in Claire's memory, the Dowager Duchess had no answer. Henrik moved then, finally, his legs carrying him forward as though through deep water. He stopped a few paces from Claire, his eyes fixed on Daniel. "May I?" he began, voice breaking. "May I see him?" Daniel turned his head slightly, peeking out from Claire's shoulder. His gray eyes, so like his father's, studied Henrik with the solemn intensity of a child who sensed something momentous was happening but couldn't yet name it. "Who is he?" Daniel whispered to Claire. Claire's throat closed. She'd prepared for this moment, rehearsed words that would be gentle and true. But now, facing it, she found only fragments. "He's your father." Daniel frowned, processing. Then, with the devastating simplicity only children possess, he asked, "Why is he crying?" Henrik's hand rose to his face, and Claire realized tears were streaming down his cheeks, silent and uncontrolled. "Because I'm happy to see you," Henrik whispered, his voice shattered. "And so sorry I wasn't there before." The ballroom had gone quiet again, everyone straining to witness this private agony made public. Claire felt the weight of their stares, their judgment, their hunger for scandal. Daniel shifted uncomfortably in her arms. "This is too much," Beatrice said, appearing at Claire's side. "He needs to leave. Look at him." She was right. Daniel's breathing had quickened, his hands clutching Claire's dress in tight fists. The excitement, the noise, the strangeness, all of it was pressing down on a child too young to understand. "Where can we go?" Claire asked, looking at Henrik. He seemed to pull himself together with visible effort. "The blue sitting room. Second floor. No one will disturb you there." He glanced at Peter. "See that they're not followed." Peter nodded, his jaw set. "Of course." As Claire turned to leave, carrying Daniel with Beatrice close behind, a voice cut through the murmurs. "This changes nothing." Louisa stood rigid, her face a mask attempting composure. Anyone could claim. "Mother." Henrik's voice, when he spoke, carried a new weight. "Be silent." The Dowager Duchess flinched as though struck. Henrik continued, his words measured but shaking with suppressed emotion. "For 5 years, you let me believe my wife abandoned me. You intercepted her letters. You forged mine. You cast out a pregnant woman with nowhere to go." He paused, breathing hard. "I don't yet know what I'm going to do about this. But I know you will not speak another word tonight." Louisa's mouth worked soundlessly. Then, with a stiff, jerky movement, she turned and swept from the ballroom. The crowd parted, no one meeting her eyes. Claire didn't wait to see more. She carried Daniel through the crowd, feeling their stares like physical touches, and climbed the marble stairs to the second floor. Behind them, Peter followed, and further back, she heard Henrik's footsteps, slower, heavier, the tread of a man whose world had just collapsed and reformed into something unrecognizable. The blue sitting room was exactly as she remembered. The same velvet furniture, the same landscape paintings, the same fireplace where she'd once sat on winter afternoons, lonely and hopeful. Now it felt like stepping into a memory that had survived without her. Daniel squirmed down from her arms and immediately went to the window, pressing his face against the cold glass to look out at the snow-covered gardens below. The normalcy of it, the pure childlike curiosity, made Claire want to weep. Beatrice closed the door softly. "That was," she began, then stopped, shaking her head. "I've never seen anything like that." "Neither have I," Claire admitted. Her legs finally gave out, and she sank into the nearest chair. "And I planned it." The door opened again. Henrik entered, moving carefully, as though afraid the room might shatter. His eyes went immediately to Daniel, then to Claire, then back to his son. "What happens now?" Beatrice asked quietly. No one had an answer. "Before we continue, I'd love to know, are you watching this unfold from New York or New Delhi, from London or Lagos, from somewhere I've never imagined these words might travel? Drop your city in the comments. There's something magical about knowing how far a story can carry the truth." The ballroom had emptied slowly, reluctantly, guests departing in clusters of scandalized whispers and backward glances. Now it stood silent, candles burning low in their sconces, the Christmas tree's ornaments catching light like witnesses to everything that had shattered here. Henrik stood at the center of the checkered marble floor and felt nothing. No, that wasn't true. He felt too much, everything at once, a weight that threatened to crush his ribs inward. Somewhere above him, Claire was settling Daniel for the night in the blue sitting room. His son, the child he'd never known existed. For years of small moments, irretrievable. "Brother." Peter approached from the shadows near the entrance, carrying 2 glasses of brandy. He offered one without comment. Henrik took it, drank half in a single swallow, barely tasting it. "The guests are gone," Peter said. "Though I suspect by morning, all of Vienna will know." "Let them know." Henrik's voice sounded foreign to his own ears. "Let them know what our mother did." Peter was quiet for a moment. Then, carefully, "What are you going to do?" Henrik stared at the empty ballroom, seeing Claire's face as she'd stood here hours ago, calm and devastating. "I don't know. How do I even begin to fix this?" "You can't fix it." Peter's bluntness was almost a relief. "What's done is done. For years gone, Henrik. You can't bring them back. But you can choose what happens next." Before Henrik could respond, hurried footsteps echoed from the corridor. Herr Schmidt appeared, ashen-faced, wringing his hands. Behind him, Frau Weber hovered, looking equally distressed. "Your Grace," Schmidt began, his voice breaking. I need to confess." Henrik finished coldly. The butler flinched. "Yes, I should have, years ago, I should have spoken. But the Dowager Duchess, she terrified you," Henrik said flatly. "I know. She terrifies everyone. That's how she's maintained control for so long." He set down his glass with careful precision. "Tell me everything. Every letter you intercepted. Every order you followed. Everything." Schmidt's confession poured out in a trembling rush. 12 letters from Claire during Henrik's absence in Prussia, each one hidden on Louise's command. Instructions to prepare Claire's departure while Henrik was away. The forged letter, written by Louisa herself using samples of Henrik's handwriting from old documents. The staff silence, maintained through fear of dismissal, loss of position, ruin. When Schmidt finished, Henrik felt hollowed out. "You watched her leave," he said quietly. "Watched my pregnant wife walk out into the February cold, alone, and you said nothing." "I am sorry," Schmidt whispered, tears streaming down his lined face. "I am so deeply sorry, Your Grace." "Your sorry means nothing to her." Henrik turned away. "You're dismissed. Pack your things tonight. I want you gone by morning." Schmidt made a choked sound, but didn't argue. He bowed deeply and retreated, Frau Weber following after casting one last anguished look at Henrik. When they were gone, Peter let out a long breath. Mother built an entire conspiracy. Yes. Henrik moved to the windows, looking out at the snow-covered grounds. and I never questioned it. Never thought to doubt her version of events. What does that make me? Deceived, not complicit. Peter joined him. Henrik, you trusted your mother. That's not a crime. It is when it costs someone everything. Henrik pressed his palm against the cold glass. Claire was alone, Peter. Alone and pregnant in a city that barely accepted her when she had my name to protect her. And I grieved the woman I thought had abandoned me while she was fighting to survive. Peter gripped his shoulder. Then make it right. Not the past. The future. Henrik closed his eyes. I don't even know if she'll let me try. There's only one way to find out. The sound of a door opening made them both turn. Their mother stood at the ballroom entrance, still in her black velvet gown, her face a carefully controlled mask. I need to speak with you, Louisa said. Henrik felt rage ignite in his chest, clean and burning. You have nothing I want to hear. Henrik, please. No. He crossed the floor toward her, watching her take an involuntary step back. You intercepted letters addressed to your Duke. You forged documents. You expelled a pregnant woman. You let me believe, for 5 years, that my wife had abandoned me when you knew the truth. I was protecting our bloodline. Henrik's voice rose. Our reputation? This family. He laughed, a bitter sound. You destroyed this family. You stole my son's first 4 years from me. You turned me into a man who didn't fight for his wife because you convinced me there was nothing to fight for. Louisa's composure cracked. She wasn't suitable. 2 years without an heir. She was carrying your heir when you threw her out. Henrik shouted, and several servants in distant corridors must have heard. My son, mother. Your grandson. And you cast him aside as if he didn't exist. I didn't know, Louisa said, but the words were weak. You didn't want to know. Henrik drew a breath, forcing himself to steady. Tomorrow, you'll leave for the country estate. You will stay there until I decide what to do with you. You will not contact Claire, you will not approach Daniel, and you will not interfere in any decision I make about my family. Am I clear? Louisa stared at him as if seeing a stranger. You cannot exile your own mother. Watch me. Henrik turned his back on her. Go. Before I say things we'll never be able to take back. For a long moment, Louisa remained. Then, with a rustle of silk, she left. Her footsteps faded down the corridor, and with them, the last vestiges of her absolute power over Oldenburg Palace. Peter exhaled slowly. Well, that's done. Henrik sank into the nearest chair, suddenly exhausted. It's not done. It's barely begun. He looked up at his brother. I have a son, Peter. A son who doesn't know me. A wife who has every reason to despise me. Then show her you're not the man who let his mother control him, Peter said gently. Show her the man you should have been 5 years ago. The one who would have burned this entire palace down before letting her leave alone. Henrik nodded slowly. Somewhere above, in the blue sitting room, Claire sat with their son. Tomorrow, he would have to face her. Tomorrow, he would have to begin the impossible work of earning back what should never have been lost. But tonight, he sat in the empty ballroom where truth had finally broken through, and let himself feel the full weight of everything he'd failed to see. Morning light filtered through the blue sitting room's windows, pale and cold. Claire woke stiffly in the armchair where she'd spent the night, a blanket someone had draped over her. Daniel slept in the sofa beside her, his face peaceful in a way that made her chest ache. He'd asked so many questions before finally drifting off. Will we stay here? Is Papa nice? Can we go home tomorrow? She hadn't known how to answer any of them. A soft knock drew her attention. Beatrice entered carrying a tray with tea and bread. You didn't come to the guest room I prepared, she said gently, setting the tray on the low table. I couldn't leave him. Claire straightened, her neck protesting. Not in a strange place. Beatrice settled into the opposite chair. Henrik came by twice during the night. Just stood outside the door. Didn't knock. I think he was checking that you were still here. Claire's hands tightened around the teacup. I'm not running again. I know. Beatrice studied her. But are you ready to talk to him? Really talk? Before Claire could answer, another knock sounded. Henrik's voice, quiet and unsure, came through the door. Claire? Are you awake? She glanced at Daniel, still sleeping. Then, drawing a steadying breath, she called. Come in. Henrik entered slowly, as though approaching something fragile. He looked as though he hadn't slept at all. His formal evening clothes had been exchanged for simpler attire, his hair uncombed, his eyes red-rimmed. When he saw Daniel sleeping on the sofa, he stopped, transfixed. I'll give you privacy, Beatrice murmured, slipping out before Claire could protest. Silence settled, broken only by Daniel's soft breathing. Henrik moved to the window, keeping distance between them. I don't know where to begin, he admitted. Neither do I, Claire said. He turned to face her. I owe you an apology that words can't possibly hold. But I'll try anyway. His voice rough. I'm sorry, Claire. For not fighting harder to find you. For believing my mother without question. For every day you suffered alone he broke off. While I grieved a lie. Claire set down her teacup before her shaking hands could drop it. You thought I'd left you. I should have known better. Henrik's hands clenched at his sides. I knew you. Knew your heart. But I let my mother's poison work its way in. Let doubt replace trust. And I will spend the rest of my life regretting that. Regret won't bring back the time we lost. I know. Henrik moved closer, stopping when she tensed. Tell me what happened. After you left. I need to know. Claire looked away. The memories were still sharp despite 5 years. I had nowhere to go. No money. No family in Vienna. I found a boarding house that would take me on credit. The room was barely larger than a closet. She swallowed hard. I discovered I was pregnant 6 weeks later. By then, I'd already started teaching English to survive. Henrik's face crumpled. Alone. You were alone through all of it. The midwife was kind. The landlady helped when she could. Claire's voice remained steady through years of practice. Daniel was born in April. When I saw his eyes, your eyes, her composure wavered. I knew he deserved better than a mother too broken to function. So I found my strength. For him. I should have been there, Henrik whispered. For his birth. His first steps. His first words. Yes. Claire met his gaze. You should have been. But you weren't. And we survived without you. The words landed like blows. Henrik absorbed them, nodding slowly. What made you come back? After 5 years. Claire glanced at Daniel, still sleeping peacefully. He started asking questions. About his father, about his name, about why we lived in a small room while other children had families. I couldn't, her throat tightened. I couldn't let him grow up believing his father didn't want him, believing he was unwanted. He was wanted, Henrik said urgently. If I had known. But you didn't know? That's the point. Claire stood, needing distance. Your mother made sure neither of us knew the truth. And now we're here, trying to piece together something from the wreckage she created. Henrik was quiet for a long moment. Then, what do you want, Claire? From me, from this situation. What do you need? She turned back to him. I need Daniel to be safe, to be recognized, to have his rightful place. He will be. I swear it. And I need. Claire faltered, the words harder than she'd expected. I need time to understand what happened, to see if there's anything left between us besides anger and loss. Henrik nodded, though the hope in his eyes dimmed. You'll have all the time you need. You and Daniel will stay here. These rooms, or any others you prefer. No one will pressure you. Least of all me. Thank you. He moved toward the door, then paused. Claire, one more thing. What? That morning, when I received the letter saying you wanted to leave, I was devastated. I nearly came home immediately. His voice dropped to something raw. My mother convinced me to finish the negotiations first. Said it would only make things worse to come home in disgrace. By the time I returned, you'd been gone for weeks. The trail was cold. Claire absorbed this. Another layer of Louise's manipulation revealed. I looked for you, Henrik continued. Hired men to search. Wrote to diplomatic families. No one knew anything. It was as though you'd vanished completely. I did vanish, Claire said quietly. That was the point. Henrik's shoulders sagged. He looked diminished, hollowed out. Without another word, he left, closing the door softly behind him. Claire returned to her chair and finally let the tears come, silent and exhausted. Beatrice returned moments later, taking one look at her face before pulling her into an embrace. It hurts, Claire whispered. Of course it does. Beatrice held her tighter. You loved him. That doesn't just disappear because he failed you. I don't know if I can trust him again. Then don't. Not yet. Beatrice pulled back, meeting her eyes. But maybe you can trust that he wants to try. That he's willing to earn it back. Claire looked at Daniel, still sleeping, still innocent. What if it's not enough? Then it's not. But at least you'll know you gave him the chance. Beatrice squeezed her hands. The real question is, what if it is enough? What if you could have a future here? A real family? Claire didn't answer. Couldn't. The possibility was too fragile, too frightening to touch. But for the first time in 5 years, she let herself wonder, what if? 3 days passed in careful distance. Henrik kept his promise, remaining apart except for brief, formal exchanges about practicalities. Claire and Daniel moved into the Duchess's chambers, room she'd once inhabited as a bewildered bride. Now they felt different, safer, somehow, with Beatrice installed in the adjoining suite and the household staff carefully vetted for loyalty. Daniel explored the palace with wide-eyed wonder, finding treasures in every corner. The library's rolling ladders, the conservatory's orange trees, the ballroom's echo when he called into its emptiness. He seemed to have forgotten his initial fear, embracing this strange new world with the adaptability of children. But he kept asking about Henrik. When can I see Papa again? He'd asked that morning, tugging at Claire's skirt while she read in the morning room. Soon, she'd promised, though her chest tightened at the longing in his voice. Now, watching from the window as Henrik crossed the courtyard below, she made a decision. Daniel deserved more than careful distance and adult hesitation. Whatever lay broken between her and Henrik, their son needed his father. She found Henrik in the study, surrounded by papers. He looked up when she entered, surprise flickering across his face. Claire, is something wrong? No. She steadied herself. Daniel wants to see you. Properly, I mean. Not just passing in corridors. Henrik's entire demeanor shifted. Are you certain? Yes. Claire moved to the window, unable to meet his eyes. He needs you. Even if I'm not ready for whatever this is between us, he deserves to know his father. Thank you. Henrik's voice carried a weight of gratitude that made her throat tighten. Now, if you're free. There's snow in the gardens. He's been asking about the horses, but I thought perhaps a walk first. Something simple. Henrik stood immediately. I'd like that. Very much. They found Daniel in the conservatory with Beatrice, examining a potted lemon tree with intense concentration. When he saw Henrik, his face lit up. Papa, Aunt Bee says lemons grow on trees. Is that true? Henrik crouched to Daniel's height, and Claire saw him physically brace himself against the emotion. It is. Would you like to see more of them? Daniel nodded enthusiastically. Henrik offered his hand. After a brief, considering look at Claire, Daniel took it. They walked through the palace gardens, Daniel between them, chattering about everything he saw. The conversation was simple, child-centered, safe. But Claire watched Henrik's face as he listened to their son, saw the wonder and grief intermingling there, and felt something in her chest shift. This was what should have been. What could have been? Mama. Daniel tugged at her hand. Can I go look at the fountain? The fountain was close, easily visible. Claire nodded. Daniel ran ahead, his laughter trailing behind him, leaving her and Henrik standing alone on the snowy path. He's extraordinary, Henrik said quietly. He is. He has your laugh. Your curiosity. Henrik paused. But he holds himself like I did as a child. Peter says it's uncanny. Claire smiled despite herself. He's stubborn, too. Once he decides something, there's no changing his mind. Definitely gets that from both of us. Henrik's voice held a tentative warmth. Silence settled, but less uncomfortable than before. They watched Daniel circle the fountain, his small footprints marking the fresh snow. Claire, Henrik began, careful. I spoke with the family solicitor yesterday. Daniel will be formally recognized as my heir. The documentation is already being prepared. His legitimacy will be unquestionable. Relief washed through her. Thank you. You don't need to thank me for giving our son what's rightfully his. Henrik turned to face her. But there's more we need to discuss. About you. Me. You're my wife. Legally, nothing has changed. But I understand, he swallowed hard. I understand if you want things to be different. Separate quarters. Separate lives, if that's what you need. I won't pressure you. Claire studied his face, seeing sincerity there. And something else. Regret. Pain. The same thing she carried. I don't know what I want, she admitted. A week ago, I thought I knew. Come here, expose the truth, secure Daniel's future, and leave. But now it's complicated. She watched Daniel throw a pebble into the fountain. He's happy here. He loves the palace, loves the space, loves. She trailed off. Loves having a father, Henrik finished quietly. Yes. Henrik moved closer, not touching, but near enough that she could feel the warmth of him. I can't undo the past. But I swear to you, Claire, I will spend the rest of my life trying to be the father Daniel deserves. And if you'll let me, His voice cracked. If you'll give me the chance, I'll try to be the husband I should have been 5 years ago. Claire felt tears prick her eyes. I'm afraid, she whispered. Of me. Of hoping again. Of believing this could work and having it shatter. I don't think I could survive that twice. Henrik's hand lifted, hovering near her face, then dropped. I'm afraid too. Terrified that I'll fail you again. But I have to try, Claire. Because the alternative is living the rest of my life knowing I had a second chance and didn't fight for it. She looked up at him. In his gray eyes, she saw echoes of the man she'd loved, but also something new, something earned through pain and loss. One day at a time, she said finally. One day at a time, Henrik agreed. Daniel called out, waving excitedly at a bird that had landed near the fountain. They moved toward him together, not quite touching but walking side by side. It wasn't forgiveness yet. It wasn't love renewed. But it was a beginning. 6 weeks later, Vienna had moved on to new scandals, as Vienna always did. The Oldenburg affair, as the newspapers had called it, had been dissected, debated, and finally filed away into the archives of aristocratic drama. Dowager Duchess Louisa remained exiled at the country estate, her absence from society noted but rarely discussed. Life had found a rhythm. Claire woke in the Duchess's chambers to winter sunlight and the sound of Daniel's laughter from the courtyard below. She moved to the window and saw her son racing through the snow with Peter, both of them building what appeared to be a snow fortress, while Beatrice watched from the terrace, wrapped in furs and laughing at their antics. And Henrik stood to the side, hands in his pockets, his face alight with joy as he watched his son play. The sight still caught her breath sometimes. The simple normalcy of it. Good morning. Beatrice appeared at her door carrying tea. You're staring again. Claire accepted the cup. I'm allowed to stare. You are. Beatrice joined her at the window. He's good with Daniel. He is. Henrik had been patient, consistent, showing up every day to spend time with their son. Not forcing anything, just being present. And Daniel had bloomed under the attention, his initial wariness transforming into genuine affection. And with you? Beatrice asked carefully. Claire's smile faded slightly. She and Henrik had maintained careful civility, orbiting each other like distant planets. Polite conversations, shared meals, discussions about Daniel, but nothing deeper, nothing that risked the fragile peace they'd built. We're figuring it out, Claire said. Are you? Or are you just avoiding the real questions? Before Claire could respond, a knock sounded. Henrik's voice came through. Claire, may I come in? She opened the door. He looked slightly sheepish, holding a leather folder. I'm sorry to disturb you, but the papers came. He offered the folder. Daniel's official recognition. It's done. Claire opened it, scanning the formal documents. Daniel's name, recorded in the official register. His legitimacy confirmed. His position as heir secured. Thank you, she whispered. There's something else. Henrik hesitated. Peter and Beatrice. Have you noticed? Claire glanced out the window where Peter was teaching Daniel how to pack snow properly, while Beatrice pretended not to watch Peter more than the child. I have, she admitted. Peter came to me yesterday, asked permission to court her. Henrik smiled slightly. I told him the decision wasn't mine. It was yours and hers. Claire felt warmth spread through her chest. Beatrice deserved happiness. And Peter had proven himself loyal and kind over these weeks. What did Beatrice say? She said yes. They're taking things slowly, but Henrik's expression softened. It's good to see them happy. Yes. Claire watched her sister laugh at something Peter said. It is. An idea formed, fragile and frightening. Claire set down the papers, gathering courage. Henrik, I need to tell you something. What? I'm tired of being afraid. The words came faster now. Tired of holding back, because I'm scared of being hurt again. These past weeks, watching you with Daniel, seeing how hard you're trying, she met his eyes. I think I want to try too. Really try. Not just coexisting, but actually rebuilding what we had. Henrik's breath caught. You mean that? I do. I'm still angry. Still hurt. But I can't. I don't want to spend the rest of my life holding on to that anger. Claire moved closer. I want to see if we can have a real marriage. A real family. Henrik's eyes shone with unshed tears. I don't deserve this chance. Probably not. Claire managed a small smile. But Daniel deserves parents who love each other. And I deserve to be happy. So do you. Henrik reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his hand cupped her face with infinite gentleness. Thank you, he whispered. I will not fail you again. One day at a time, she reminded him. One day at a time, he agreed. Outside, Daniel's voice called, Mama, Papa, come see our fortress. They looked at each other, and something passed between them. Understanding. Hope. The first real connection since that night in the ballroom. Together, they went out into the snow. I'm curious, has a story ever changed your mind about forgiveness? About second chances? Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Are you in a place where snow falls like this, or somewhere the sun never stops? I love knowing how these moments reach across the world. Spring arrived with startling suddenness, melting the last of winter's hold on Vienna. Claire stood in Henrik's private study, watching him sign the final documents that would establish Daniel's education fund, inheritance rights, and legal standing. Every detail meticulously arranged, every protection secured. Done, Henrik said, setting down his pen. He looked at her, and she saw the question he hadn't asked. Yes, she prompted. There's something I need to say. Something I should have said weeks ago, but I was afraid. He came around the desk. I love you, Claire. I never stopped. Even when I thought you'd left me, even through all of it, his voice broke. I have loved you every single day. Claire's breath caught. She'd known, on some level, had felt it in his every action, every gentle touch, every moment of patient waiting. But hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way that terrified and exhilarated her. Henrik, you don't have to say it back, he said quickly. Not unless you mean it. Not unless you're ready. But I needed you to know. No more secrets between us. No more words left unspoken. Claire moved closer. These months had shown her the man Henrik truly was beneath his mother's influence. Patient, kind, devoted. He'd proven himself in 1,000 small ways, and she'd felt her heart slowly, cautiously opening again. I love you too, she whispered. I'm scared, but I love you. Henrik's eyes closed as if absorbing a blow and a blessing simultaneously. When he opened them, they shone with tears. Can I kiss you? She nodded, and he moved slowly, carefully, giving her every chance to change her mind. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and reverent, nothing like the passion of their early marriage, but somehow deeper. A promise made with full knowledge of what they'd lost and what they were choosing to rebuild. When they parted, Claire rested her forehead against his. I want a real marriage. Not separate rooms. Not careful distance. I want to try again. Are you certain? Henrik's hands framed her face. We can take more time. I'm certain. Claire smiled through tears. Daniel deserves parents who love each other. And I want to come home. Really home. Henrik pulled her close, and she felt his tears against her hair. Thank you. Thank you for giving me this chance. For not giving up on us. Thank you for proving you deserved it, she whispered back. They stood there, holding each other, while spring light filled the study. Outside, Daniel's laughter drifted up from the gardens where Peter and Beatrice were teaching him to identify early flowers. There's one more thing, Henrik said, pulling back slightly. A formal announcement. To Vienna, to society. Reaffirming our marriage publicly. Showing everyone that you're my wife, my Duchess, and that nothing will ever come between us again. Claire considered this. The public scrutiny, the attention, the inevitable whispers. When, a month from now, a spring ball. But only if you're comfortable. We don't have to. We do. Claire interrupted. I hid for 5 years. I'm done hiding. Pride shone in Henrik's eyes. Then we'll do it together. A month later, Vienna's elite gathered once more at Oldenburg Palace. But this time, the atmosphere was different. Celebratory rather than scandalous. The newly reconciled Duke and Duchess stood at the top of the grand staircase, Daniel between them in miniature formal attire, looking serious and important. Peter cleared his throat and raised his glass. To my brother and sister-in-law, to their son, the heir to Oldenburg, and to new beginnings built on truth. To new beginnings, the crowd echoed. Claire felt Henrik's hand tighten around hers. She looked up at him and saw not the uncertain young man who'd chosen her 7 years ago, but someone stronger. Someone who'd been tested and proven. I love you, he murmured, meant only for her. I love you too, she replied. Daniel tugged at both their hands. Can we dance now? They laughed, and together descended into the ballroom. No more secrets. No more lies. Just a family, rebuilt from ruins, stepping forward into a future they'd earned. 8 months had passed since that spring ball. Summer had given way to autumn, And now early winter frost decorated the palace gardens once more. But this winter felt different from the one that had brought Claire back. This winter held warmth. Claire woke to morning light and found Henrik already awake beside her, watching her with the soft expression he wore only in their most private moments. "Good morning," he whispered. "Good morning." She shifted closer, and he wrapped an arm around her. This simple intimacy, hard-won and precious, still felt miraculous some days. "Daniel's already up," Henrik said. "I heard him with the new puppy." Claire smiled. The puppy had been Peter's gift to his nephew, a small golden creature that Daniel had immediately named Emperor and treated like royalty. "We created a monster. A happy monster." They lay there a moment longer before duty called them to rise. Breakfast had become a sacred ritual, all of them together, including Peter and Beatrice, who'd officially announced their engagement last month. The table was loud with conversation and laughter, so different from the formal, silent meals Claire remembered from her first time as Duchess. "Mama, Papa, can Emperor come to lessons?" Daniel asked hopefully. "Absolutely not," Claire said, trying not to smile at his theatrical disappointment. "Your mother's right," Henrik added. "Emperor needs training of his own. But perhaps after your studies, we could all take a walk. With Aunt Bee and Uncle Peter? If they're willing," Henrik said, glancing at his brother with amusement. Peter groaned good-naturedly. "I suppose I can be convinced." Beatrice laughed, reaching over to squeeze his hand. The affection between them was clear and comfortable. Watching them, Claire felt a deep contentment. Her sister had found happiness here, against all odds. After breakfast, Claire retreated to the morning room where she'd begun writing letters to English families she'd once taught, using her position now to secure them better opportunities. It was small work, but it mattered, using her second chance to help others find theirs. Henrik found her there in the afternoon, carrying tea. "Working again?" he asked, setting down the tray. "Always." But she accepted the tea gratefully. "Thank you." He settled beside her, reading over her shoulder. "You're too generous. I remember what it was like to have nothing. If I can help others avoid that." "I know." Henrik kissed her temple. "It's one of the 1,000 reasons I love you." She leaned into him, comfortable in a way she'd once thought impossible. "We've come a long way." "We have." Henrik was quiet a moment. "Do you ever think about her?" "My mother?" Claire considered. Louisa remained at the country estate, allowed occasional visits from Peter, but otherwise isolated from family affairs. "Sometimes. I don't hate her anymore." "You don't." "I'm angry at what she did. But hating her would only hurt us." Claire turned to face Henrik. "She gave us something, in a strange way. The chance to rebuild without her interference. To choose each other freely." Henrik's eyes shone. "You're remarkable. You know that." "I'm just trying to be happy." She smiled. "And I am. Truly happy. With you, with Daniel, with this life we're building. Even on the hard days." "There will be more hard days," Henrik warned. "I know, but we'll face them together." That evening, the family gathered in the library. Daniel was curled up on Henrik's lap while Henrik read to him, Claire beside them with her needlework, Peter and Beatrice across the way arguing good-naturedly about a book they'd both recently finished. Emperor slept at Daniel's feet, twitching through puppy dreams. This was home. Not the palace, not the title, not the wealth. These people, these moments, this hard-won peace. Daniel's eyes drifted closed, his breathing evening out. Henrik carefully shifted him without waking, pressing a kiss to his son's hair. "He's getting heavy," Henrik murmured. "He's growing," Claire replied. "Next year he'll be too big to fall asleep in your lap. Don't remind me." They sat there as the fire burned low, comfortable in silence. Eventually, Peter and Beatrice said their goodnights, leaving Claire and Henrik alone with their sleeping son. "I never thought we'd have this," Henrik said quietly. "After everything that happened, I thought." "I know." Claire leaned her head on his shoulder. "But we do have it. We fought for it. We earned it. Every day, I wake up grateful." "So do I." Henrik turned his head to kiss her, soft and sweet. When they parted, he smiled. "I love you, Claire. Every day, more than the day before." "I love you too," she whispered. "More than I ever thought possible." They stayed there, the three of them, until Henrik finally carried Daniel up to bed. Later, in their own chambers, Claire curled against her husband's warmth and let herself feel the full weight of this happiness. It had been earned through pain and time and choice. But it was real. It was theirs, And it was enough. 1 year later, the marble colonnade of Oldenburg Palace gleamed in the June sunlight, no longer cold and merciless, but warm and welcoming. Claire stood at the bottom of the steps, Daniel's hand in hers, and remembered the winter night she'd arrived here with fear and determination warring in her chest. "Mama, why are we stopping?" Daniel asked. He was 5 now, taller, more confident, every inch a young duke in training. "Just remembering," Claire said. Henrik appeared beside them, carrying their daughter, 3-month-old Helena, named for his grandmother. The baby gurgled contentedly, her gray eyes, those family eyes, bright and curious. "Remembering what?" Henrik asked, though his smile suggested he knew. "The night I came back." Claire looked up at the palace, at the windows where light had once seemed so distant. Now those windows were hers. This palace was home. How terrified I was. How certain everything would fall apart. "I'm glad you came back," Daniel said seriously. "Otherwise I wouldn't have Papa. Or Helena. Or Emperor." Henrik laughed. "Well, we can't forget Emperor." As if summoned, the dog bounded around the corner, now fully grown and still ridiculous. Daniel released Claire's hand to chase after him, his laughter echoing across the courtyard. Claire turned to find Henrik watching her with that expression that still made her heart catch. "What?" she asked. "Nothing. Just this. You. Us." He shifted Helena to one arm so he could take Claire's hand. "I love you. I love you too." They walked up the steps together, into the palace that had once been a place of pain, but was now truly home. Behind them, the iron gate stood open, not closed, not barring entry, but welcoming, a symbol of how far they'd come. Inside, Beatrice and Peter waited in the garden where their own wedding would take place next month. Daniel raced ahead to show them something Emperor had done. Helena cooed in Henrik's arms. Claire paused at the threshold, one last look at the world outside, at the Vienna streets where she'd once struggled alone. Then she turned back to Henrik, to their children, to the family they'd built from ruins. "Ready?" Henrik asked. "Ready." They stepped inside together. The door closed softly behind them, not with finality, but with peace. The long journey from that winter night to this summer afternoon, through pain and revelation, through anger and forgiveness, through fear and hope, was complete. They were home. They had always been home. They just needed time to find their way back. If this story touched you, if it reminded you that broken things can be mended and lost love can be found again, I'd be grateful if you'd share it with someone who needs to hear it. And one last time, I'd love to know where this tale found you. Drop your city in the comments. From Vienna to your corner of the world, may we all find our way home.